So here is some of the exit interviews from the World Cup so far. I've actually already done videos on Sri Lanka, West Indies, Scotland and Bangladesh. I think I've got all 4 of them. But I'm just going to try and cover a few things that we haven't really talked about so much, and also throw forward now that they aren't here anymore. Well, some of them are still here, but they can't win the whole tournament at the very least.
This is the last knock. When was the first knock? Don't know.
Sri Lanka. They are building a really interesting core of a team. And let's look at what they have. A few new ball bowlers who have pace or skill. I worry a bit more about them coming back on later on, but up front, I think it's a nice combination. They also seem really confident. Chamira got an IPL call-up this year. Karunaratne and Kumara really impressed at times. I think they probably need a bankable left-arm seamer going forward. And I don't see a great death bowler in this particular lineup. And Chamira's maybe the one who might be able to do it, but the others just look terrible at times. And that's a bit of a concern. They also have guys who can hit spin in the middle. In fact, with Asalanka, Rajapaksa and Hasaranga possibly got, a number 4, a number 5 and a number 7. Finding someone like Asalanka is incredible if he keeps playing spin the way that he is right now. To be able to build around him and the others is just a great start. And they have 2 world-class spinners in Tikshana and Hasaranga, which is a great combo. Tikshana can bowl earlier in the innings and Hasaranga is not afraid to go deep into the death, I suppose. I really like the combination of the different kinds of bowlers they are as well. But there are some concerns here. Death bowling is one I've already mentioned, but also they don't really have a top 3. But I do think these are things that you can find by having a local league. Now that all their top batters will get a bunch of innings, opening the batting first drop, and their seamers will get a chance to develop. When it comes to death bowling in particular, it's very hard to just learn it at the international level. So if all your seamers are bowling at the death, you'll probably find a few players who are just really good at it. That's not quite the case for opening, but more players will be tried at the top in all their leagues, and it's possible someone will develop. I still think that Dhananjaya De Silva would be a really good opener at franchise level, who may even be able to do it for Sri Lanka. And Kusal Perera is still a really good talent, even if he had quite a poor tournament. I was one of the many people who thought the West Indies should have done better. I can't remember if I picked them to win the tournament at one stage, but I'm sure I did. And I kind of still, looking at their team, think that they still should have done a lot better than they did. In their batting, no one made 100 runs in the first 4 games. That's their strength. That's what everyone is afraid of. And really, outside of Puran and 2 knocks, and 1 each from Hetmeyer and Lewis, no one made any runs at all. It was sparse. Incredibly sparse. And I think the obvious thing that most people are going to look at now is the ages. And this is an old team. I don't actually have that big of a problem with that. Where I have my problem is I know how much talent is behind this aging core. Like if you look at Puran, Hetmeyer and Fabian Allen, you could have other guys like Powell, Hemraj, Cornwell and Rutherford. There's so many others out there who are very talented, but they haven't quite developed to a level where they can push out Gale and Simmons. And I think that's where the problem is. It's not a lack of talent with those younger players. It's that they haven't developed properly yet. And you wonder if Cricket West Indies is really helping that. As bad as the batting was, the bowling is actually probably the bigger problem because they came here with a bowling lineup that really wasn't set up to take wickets. Obed McCoy getting injured was a problem, and O'Shane Thomas, they just don't seem to back him that much. But they took 12 wickets in their first 4 games. And really, having worked in the CPL and followed West Indies cricket really closely, I'm not sure West Indies are really making attacking bowlers in T20 cricket anymore. They find an incredible amount of defensive spoiler bowlers or all-rounders with a few limits, but they really need to start pushing attacking bowlers again. There really is still plenty of talent in West Indies cricket, but the thing is, will Cricket West Indies develop it, or will they continue to let the Avengers assemble? They need top 3 batters, attacking bowlers, and they need to find another spinner. That's something that they have to do as a unit, not just hope these players keep arriving because other countries want to pay them lots of money. Scotland was the team I worked for when they qualified for this tournament, and I thought they were great in the first round. Then they really struggled when they got to the second, but they played a really good game against New Zealand. Their batting has been poor for them though this tournament. I've worked for this team, I've seen them up close. This is absolutely their strength. Just hasn't quite happened for them in this tournament. And the worry is that the batting core is 3 guys over the age of 32. It's not terminal, but I don't see any obvious replacements coming through right at the moment. They continue to find good spinners. I think Davey, after 2015 World Cup, is even better now than he was back then. Brad Wheel bowled quite well in the 100. Sharif is just such a dependable bowler game after game for Scotland. He just almost never goes away. And he's obviously just a very high quality bowler. And in Mark Watt, they might have found an amazingly frugal left arm finger spinner. It's a bit too early to make a call on someone like Chris Greaves, but I would have thought that if you go back and you look at Scotland's bowling, I think they've bowled really well this tournament. And they still have players like Michael Leask, who everyone in Scottish cricket has been waiting to develop for so long. Everyone knows what he is capable of, just whether he can do it regularly. Played a couple of really good innings here. That's something, again, if he can learn how to hit consistently, he can completely change this team. There are obviously some problems with Scotland though. They need left arm pace. A frontline wrist spinner is probably something else, and they need a young gun to slip into their top 4. But what Scotland really needs is money and structure. They were a very amateur team as late as 2015 World Cup, and they've made incredible strides just in a couple of years. But this is still a few guys on low local contracts and some county players coming together. I do think there is talent, and that game against New Zealand really showed us that. They cut off the heads of the Kiwi top order, pulled back set players who were already smashing them everywhere, and then they gave themselves a chance with the bat. They probably just lost wickets too frequently. But all in all, there is absolutely no doubt that this is Scotland's best ever World Cup campaign in either format. I've already gone large on Bangladesh's batting. They just don't score quick enough. They need a wrist spinner or wrist spinners, and they're kind of praying that Mustafiz's shoulder stays intact at a certain point. They've got some young talent coming through in the batting, but I think they seem to have the same sort of problems that the older players that they're replacing do. They just don't go anywhere. And their bowling is good, but it's just not good enough to overcome the fact that they're regularly having to defend 120, 130, 140. They just need to work out how to play T20 cricket away from Bangladesh. But having said all that, I think their biggest problem is probably going to be that Shakib Al Hasan is going to soon stop playing for them. And as a thought experiment, I was trying to determine how important Shakib was to Bangladesh when he was ruled out of the rest of the tournament. Look, this all got a bit crude, but what I was really trying to do is look at what happens when a player of his quality is no longer available. And I didn't really use any advanced metrics here. I just used normal stats and tried to use some basic cricket logic. Shakib as a batter averages 22 with a strike rate of 121. Last 3 years, he's been roughly the same as this. At his best, he was probably a lot better. And I would say in another team, he could probably bat in a better spot and be of more use. But Bangladesh have tried to make him into a number 3 because they've needed a number 3. And he's made runs there, even if they have been a bit slow. But this is where it gets interesting, because to replace him in the first game, they picked a 21-year-old Shamim Hassan. Now, Shamim has good lower-level domestic numbers, but in the BPL and internationally, he's really struggled. So far, in 18 games of those two combined, he's averaged 12 with a strike rate of 140. The added strike rate in this team, of all teams, is very attractive, but Shamim also bats far lower. This means that the batting order needs to move around when you lose someone like Shakib. And while a lower order player going up would be expected to average slightly higher with more opportunities at the top, there's still obviously a gap here. I think all things considered, if you take Shakib out of their batting, they're probably losing around 6 runs off their expected batting total. Now, Shakib, the bowler, is way better. He averages 19.79 with an economy of 666, I think, which is almost impossible to beat. Last 3 years, his average has actually been 17. In this tournament, he was averaging 11, even if a lot of that was in the early round. And when Bangladesh had to replace him, this is the thing. They brought in a young batter with a good striking rate, and they were hoping that that would work for them. But that meant their existing batters had to step up and bowl more. I based all this on the first game after Shakib's injury against South Africa, where obviously they didn't bowl very long, and so it didn't matter. But my guess is from their rotation, what they were trying to do is replace him with a combination of Sumya Saka and Mahmudullah. Now, Saka can't bowl. He's going for nearly 3 runs and over more than Shakib, and he's less than half the chance of taking his wicket. In no way is he ever going to be able to make up for anything that Shakib could do with the ball in his hand. Mahmudullah is slightly more interesting. I think that he has good T20 numbers. In some ways, he's a bit like Glenn Maxwell, I suppose, because when he bowls in favourable conditions, he does quite well. But he averages 8 balls a game for Bangladesh and has only bowled once in this tournament. And so if you look at a straight swap, and it's not completely fair because this is a World Cup squad and they weren't expecting Shakib to go down, all that sort of thing. But if Saka bowls 1 over and Mahmudullah bowls 3, they would have gone for 31.1 runs while taking 1 wicket. Whereas Shakib would have been expected to go for 25.2 runs and take 1.48 wickets. And a wicket in T20 cricket, I haven't looked this up recently, but is worth between 7 and 8 runs. So half a wicket better is quite an advantage. And there's also when they would bowl, because Shakib can come in early, he can completely clamp the middle overs, and he can also bowl the death in some situations. Well, like part-time combination is going to have to bowl in the middle overs, aren't they? And based on these numbers, I would say that Bangladesh is down 12 runs with him not bowling in this match at a World Cup if they replace him with part-timers. That means that I have Bangladesh down 18 runs overall in that first game after Shakib's injury. And that's even with Shakib's now limited batting. So if we assume that Bangladesh's expected total was 140, without him that drops to 134. And if we thought, well, they could hold the opposition down to 150, with the part-timers, it's now 162. Now, these numbers are a bit out of my arse. But even so, there is some real stats and cricket logic behind them. In this particular case, I think it's more dramatic because of the way they actually replaced him. They could have lessened the damage if they brought in a solid bowling or top order batter. But that's kind of the deal, isn't it? Because he is both of those things. And how do you actually replace someone like Shakib Al Hasan when there aren't that many? He's been the best all-rounder in the world at white ball cricket and probably T20 cricket for a few years there as well. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. There just aren't that many players out there. Now you have a Bangladesh team that's already not making runs that is probably very soon going to be without Shakib Al Hasan. I don't know how they replace him. They haven't produced many batters of his quality. He's probably the best bowler they have ever had. And he allows them to be in a lot more one-day games and T20 games than anyone else. Maybe they can get one more World T20 out of him. I doubt he makes it in the next ODI World Cup though. At the moment, what I'm really trying to say is, they're not a particularly good side with him. What are they going to be like without him?